Mo of MOET. I'm Michael Oss. I've been in Bournemouth now for over 12 years, and I originally moved to Bournemouth as one of the staff members here at the church. I worked as the evangelist on staff here at Lansdowne Church for 5 years, and during that time I started to speak increasingly at, amongst other things, university mission weeks. A university mission week is a week-long series of evangelistic events held by a Christian student group in the university. I was being invited to do a number of these, so much so that after 5 years of working at the church, the staff team said, maybe you shouldn't work for the church anymore because you're never here. And so we set up this trust called MOET, Michael Ots Evangelism Trust, to support me initially, to go out and to be involved in that work of university missions. But I am not the only part of MOET. We also have ET. We have others involved in MOET. Gaynor, who's here today, is our administrator and sorts out a lot of the practical organisation. Gareth, who's away on holiday, so he's probably quite happy he's not here because he's enjoying himself on holiday. He's our director of training and also helps the CUs, the Christian unions in the organisation. And then we've had the associates, and many of you have been aware of Eliza and Elizabeth over the last few weeks as they've just finished their one-year scheme, and other people who come for a shorter period. Some of you met Marina, or you saw her playing the violin. She's one of the people that's been involved with MOET on a shorter period of just a few weeks during the year, being trained up. And then Yaz, some of you know, getting married this year. She's been on placement from Moorlands at the church. She's also been with MOET over the last few years. But MOET's also bigger than that. We have a trust team. I'll let Julian talk about that later. But it's also the supporters, those who pray. And I know many of you pray regularly for us, and you are part of the team by your prayers. And also those who give as well. And again, you're part of the team by your support in that way. So thank you if you have been a part of what MOET has been doing over the last few years. And if you've not, well, hopefully the next few minutes will just excite you and encourage you with what the Lord has been doing through us and through the work of the Christian unions across Europe. Okay? I want to just give you a little kind of brief helicopter ride around the UK to start with. Just say some of the places where I have been involved in missions over the last year. We started this year in Edinburgh in January with a citywide mission. The first time all the universities in Edinburgh had worked together. We had a huge team of 48 guests from 9 countries coming to help with that mission. And then during the daytimes, events right across the city in the different universities. And then in the evenings, really big central events. In Greyfriars Church, right at the centre of the city, where up to 400 people came along each night from all the universities to hear the gospel. A really encouraging week. And then from there, I went down to Cambridge, quite a well-known university. And I was speaking each lunchtime in this building here, Great St Mary's Church, right in the heart of Cambridge, just opposite King's College. And interestingly, 60 years ago to the year, this was the church where Billy Graham preached at the University Mission in Cambridge. And even though I'm not Billy Graham, it was really encouraging that the Christian Union had worked hard, and we filled that church every day, 500, 600 people coming along, hearing the gospel explained. Imagine the military operation required to feed that many people in 5 minutes flat. And then from there we went down to Bristol to work with the Christian Union, and it was really encouraging to see up to 200 people packing in again each lunchtime, and similarly in the evenings to hear the gospel. Up to Nottingham, where I was working with Michael Green. Some of you remember Michael from the More to Life mission. We've worked in partnership on a number of missions, and again the CU had worked really hard getting numbers along. The evening events particularly were exciting because we had queues of people outside the door waiting to get in before the event was even due to start. And every night there was a bit of an operation trying to recruit new chairs from around the building to make sure everyone could get in. And then the last mission we did in the UK was in Swansea, down in southwest Wales. A smaller Christian union there, but really creative in their advertising. Here's one of the girls wandering around with her sandwich boards, advertising the lunch bars. This guy on the left is wearing a giant hamburger, advertising the talks. And the people on the right are dressed up as geeky scientists, because that talk that was on the subject, Has Science Buried God? And it was wonderful that during the week, although the numbers were smaller, maybe 40 or 50 along to each of the events, On the last night, we had 4 people trust Christ from 4 different nationalities and continents. So wonderful to see the Lord at work there in Swansea. But the missions don't just happen in the UK, they also happen right across Europe. And this is where the team have been involved in missions just over the last 6 months or so. Right up in Norway, down to Malta, down in the Balkans, across in Kiev, in Ukraine and Moldova, Poland, Czech Republic. And you'll hear about some of the things that happened in a moment. I want to just give you a flavour of one of those mission weeks by showing you a short video. Some of you saw this at the prayer meeting a couple of months ago, but if you didn't, it's worth seeing, and if you did, it's worth seeing again. This was a video they made in Ukraine after the mission week in Kiev that we've been involved in, and hope you enjoy it.
Come on, put them together tonight! I'm alive, 'cause Jesus gave me life. He opened up my eyes. I can see clearly now.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm from England, and I've been here all week speaking at the events here at the KPI Mission Week. It's my second time speaking at a Mission Week here. We had the first one last year. It's been really encouraging to see how things have grown from last year. The student group has got bigger, so we've had a bigger team to be able to get involved. And we've had lots more guests coming along to the event. The week started quite small on Monday, but every day we've had more and more guests coming along, and so today we've had standing room only at the events. We've had really varied reactions. Some people came in quite cynical, but they've grown in their interests. People have been asking loads of questions. We've had some people who are really close to putting their trust in Jesus. And I'm sure that over the next few weeks we'll see even more happening as well. So it's great to see that when you do something not just once, but you do it again, you can do it bigger, you can do it better, and you can learn from the year before. And so I'm really looking forward to what's going to happen next year, not only here in Kiev, but all across Ukraine in the other university cities as well.
Спікер справді дав відповідь на ті питання, які давно хвилювали, але які соромився задати один одному, а, наприклад, в церкві священнику ти ж не задаш такі відверті запитання.
Этот проект, что-то очень новое, такое необычное, все так сделано, задумка, не смогли изменить мое мнение, о чем-то задуматься, о том, что я даже не задумывался никогда.
Я вважаю, що ця програма відіграє дуже велику і значну роль для студента. Ми можемо донести їм про Ісуса Христа, про Його милість, любов.
That gives you a little bit of a flavour of just one of the weeks that we've been involved in over the course of this year. Well, I wanted to just share with you some of the key ingredients, really, to the missions that we're a part of, what we try and do with the Christian Union, and what makes these missions a success. And hopefully these principles might also apply to us in church, not just to student groups as well. But one of the key things that we do with the groups is preparation. We make sure that we don't just rock up for the mission week and turn up and give a series of talks, but we work really hard through the course of the year to prepare the Christian Union for the mission week. And ideally what we do is we go about 6 months before, for a whole weekend to train the students in evangelism, to get them ready for what they're going to be involved, because we think that's a really important part of it. And we always do a number of those weekends in the autumn term. We've also been involved in a thing called FOIA, the Fellowship of Evangelists in the Universities of Europe. And it's a bit of a mouthful. FOIA is the German word for fire, by the way. And so I've been involved in that, training people up from different countries around Europe. This is just recently, a couple of weeks ago in Montenegro, with a team of about 35 students and staff from across the Balkans being trained up and prepared for university missions. So preparation is really important, as is planning. And that's one of Gareth's key roles, is to work with the planning team from each of these groups to help them get things ready. We wrote a manual that we send to them, and there are all sorts of other resources that we send to the groups to help them get things ready, because lots of them haven't organised something like this before. They're 20, 19 maybe, and we need to help them in the planning process as well. But alongside that, and most important, is prayer. We really think prayer is so important. And this has really come home to me again just over the last 6 months or so. I was reminded reading that story in the Gospels where the disciples, you remember, couldn't cast out the demon from that boy. And they go to Jesus and they say, why couldn't we do it? And Jesus says, this kind only comes out by prayer. And there are some things that we can't do simply by preparing and planning. There are some things that will only happen if we pray. And what's really struck me has been the prayerfulness of many of these student groups. This is 8 a.m. On a cold February morning in Bristol. The room wasn't that much warmer, but there's about 200 people in that room gathered to pray, basically the whole Christian Union. And it's no surprise that God has often worked in response not just to the preparation and the planning, but the prayer of the people there. And I always find it a real challenge to myself, and I think we should maybe find that as a challenge to us as a church. How much do we really pray, and how much do we just depend on the other practical preparations? But prayer is absolutely key, and I know that many of you pray as well for us in the missions, and that's so important. What we also encourage groups to be is pioneering, and one of the exciting things is working with student groups across Europe that have never organised a mission week before. Just a few weeks ago in May, we were in Moldova, and it's the poorest country in Europe. It's as poor again from Romania as Romania is from here, just to give you a kind of sense of the situation there. But the student group there organised their mission week. We went to help them, and it was wonderful that in a country where just a few years ago they still had a communist government, now there's freedom and openness to share the gospel. We could use the main canteen, we could get good venues, we could hand out flyers on campus, and they realised that they could do it. So that was the first one for them. And then back in November, myself and Elizabeth were in Prague, and this was the first mission week that they had ever organised. And so to really start the thing off with a bang, they invited John Lennox, Professor of Maths from Oxford University, to come and give a lecture. They advertised it, but they weren't sure how many would come, because the Czech Republic is often known as the most atheistic country in Europe. Here is the lecture room, just as it was about to start. 700 people came, 300 people had to be turned away because they couldn't fit them in. And that's even without fire safety regulations. But it was an amazing opportunity. And then off the back of that, all sorts of events happening through the week. I was there for one of them, an acoustic night in a kind of underground cavern. It was great, with Andy Mayo, a musician, singer-songwriter from London, who some of you know. And it was wonderful to see what the Lord was doing there in the Czech Republic. So missions happening for the first time across Europe. But another key is partnership. And one of the things that we've been involved in is bringing people from other student movements across Europe to come and see the missions that are happening here in the UK. And here are some of the groups of international guests that we had at the missions here in the UK, in Bristol and in Nottingham there. And we've had about 50 people come from 10 different countries to those missions with the idea of getting ideas and then going back to their country. And what we do is we then say, we'll come back and help you put on a mission in your own situation. And so here I am with a team of students from Durham University in Montenegro going to help with the mission week that they were organising there. So there's partnership between the UK and the groups in Europe. But what's really encouraging is that there's now partnership happening right across Europe between the different countries. So we did mission weeks this year in Serbia and in Montenegro. And it was great that teams of students travelled from each of the country to help with the mission week in the other one. And one of the ideas across the Balkans is that together as a group of countries, they can support each other. Just think for a moment what a powerful testimony to the gospel that is. When you have students from countries that were fighting each other 20 years ago, now working together in partnership in the gospel. That's a tremendous thing. And it's really encouraging that this idea of public missions is now kind of organically spreading and growing even without the UK influence. Another thing that we like to do is public debates, partly because they really do get a big kind of attention on the campus. The philosophy faculty and other faculties sometimes sponsor it. And this is one that we did in Serbia. I've debated this chap, Bojan, twice now. He is the representative of the atheists of Serbia. And although normally it's quite hard sometimes to get people to come along, we had about 120 people packed into this cafe for that debate. It was really exciting. It was very smoky, because in Serbia there's no anti-smoking regulation. So if I die of lung cancer, I reckon that night was probably the night that did it. I could hardly breathe by the end of the evening. But it was wonderful. Debates are hard in some ways because you don't get to share as much as you do if you were just giving a talk. But there are people there who would never come if you were just giving a talk. And there were several people afterwards that commented, it wasn't just what you say, but the manner in which you said it that really compelled us to want to find out more. And then because it was the first night, a number of them came back. And it was great to see atheists coming back, bringing groups of their friends, who then brought groups of their friends, and so on. One of them was in tears the next night, and she said, I never realized, as she heard the story of the prodigal son that night, I never realized, she said, that God was like this. So debates have a wonderful way of intriguing people to want to find out more. But what's central to all the mission weeks is proclamation. We want to proclaim the gospel. But it doesn't have to be done in a boring manner, in a dull venue. It can be done in all sorts of ways and creatively. So we use different venues. Sometimes we take over churches, but we transform them into restaurants and cafes. In Montenegro, we got to use the main lecture room in the centre. As you saw in Serbia, we've got a cafe right at the heart of the campus, which is a brilliant location because people just wander in off the streets. And the decor is important, and it's amazing to see what students can do with some fairy lights and some cardboard boxes and some gaffer tape. Food goes down well, and it's amazing again to see how students can cater for 200 or more on a shoestring budget. Things like music and drama can all add to the proclamation of the gospel as well. If you're wondering what they were doing, you'll have to ask later. But we also have used testimony. Testimonies of students, but also some interesting testimonies like this chap, my friend Slavko. Slavko was a mafia boss in Bosnia before his conversion. You'll be glad to know he isn't anymore. But he's got a fascinating story of God encountering him. And I tell you what, it's not hard to advertise an event where you're inviting people to come and hear an ex-mafia boss speak. Everyone wants to come, which is why we had 400 people in that night. In fact, the security guards on the door said, sorry, we're not going to let any more people in. And so after sweet-talking him with some cakes, he said, okay, I'll let a few more in. So we absolutely packed it out. So proclaiming the gospel, but doing it with drama, with music, in good venues, with testimonies, in a way that really engages people. But the gospel is central. But alongside the public work, there is the real value of the personal work as well. I want to just talk about this chap with the orange beanie on. He's called Rob, and he was at the mission week in Nottingham that I was around at. And he lived with a group of Christian students in a house there in Nottingham, and so he got invited to the events, and he came every lunchtime and every evening during the week. And after the talks, his friends introduced him to me, and he said, I've got a number of questions about your talk. So we would sit down and we would chat through his questions, and then the next day he would come and say, I've got some more questions about your talk, and we would sit down and we'd talk through his questions. And then on Thursday evening, I said to him, well, what are your questions now? And he said, well, I think I've run out of questions. I said, well, if you can't think of any more questions, why shouldn't you become a Christian? And he said, well, I'm not sure about that. That would be a really big step to make. I said, well, here's a deal. I give you 24 hours. If you can think of a good excuse for not becoming a Christian in the next 24 hours, go for it. But if you can't, I think you should tomorrow, okay? He said, okay, deal. So the next night he came along, I went straight up to him after the talk. I said, Rob, can you think of any? He said, no, I'm afraid not. And I said, well, you know what you need to do then? He said, oh, I'm a bit nervous. I said, come on, man up. Be a bloke. I'll pray, you pray, your friend can pray, we'll have it done in 2 minutes. And he said, okay. And he did. And it was wonderful that 1 week later, at the next Christian Union meeting, he stood up in front of 200 people and shared his testimony about how he came to Christ. And was so thankful for his Christian friends, for the talks, but also the opportunity for one-to-one conversations that led him through to Christ. Personal work is really important. And then perseverance is also really key. Many of you know about Uncover. We had Becky here a few months ago talking about this resource of Seeker Bible studies. And many of the student groups use this. It's been translated into Russian, into Romanian, to other languages, to help students continue, because the mission week shouldn't be the end. And in many cases, it's just the beginning of people's investigation into Jesus. And it's been really encouraging post the mission weeks this term to hear of people that have come to know Jesus. There's one situation in Serbia where we were doing the mission in Belgrade. And on the last night, a girl came along to the event. And we said, oh, why did you come? She said, well, this morning you invited me to come to the talk. And I said I couldn't come because I was going to Croatia. And so she had gone to Croatia, or at least she had tried to. But when she got to the border, she realized she'd forgotten her passports. She was like, oh, gutted, I can't go to Croatia. So she came back and she said, well, if I can't go to Croatia, I might as well come to the talk. And she did, and she was so impacted. She came to the Bible studies afterwards. She's now trusting Jesus, part of the student group there in Serbia. As I said, a few weeks ago, I was in Montenegro. And it was great in Montenegro, in the hotel where we had that conference, to bump into one of the students who had been to the mission week just a month before. And since then, she's been coming to the group, the Bible studies. She started trusting Christ, and one of her friends has as well. He's come from a Muslim background. So it's been great to see that the mission weeks may start something that will carry on after the week has finished. But there's also the importance of persistence. You know, sometimes when you organise something the first time, it doesn't always work well. And the temptation is to give up. We find that in church sometimes, don't we? We try something, it doesn't work, we think, oh, we'll never try again. And I've loved the persistence of some of these groups, not to give up, but when things don't work well, to think, how can we do it? Rather than, let's not bother. This picture was taken 6 years ago in the city of Novi Sad in northern Serbia. And I went there, that's me, that's Slavko, the mafia boss, and the staff worker in that city, and 2 students, which was pretty much the entire student group at the time. And I said, well, why don't you do some public events? Why don't you do a mission week? And the staff worker at the time said, we could never do a mission week in this city. People wouldn't come, we can't get venues, you don't understand the opposition we have here, we can't do it. Don't try and encourage us to do it. We brought them over to see a mission in Britain, they said, no, we just couldn't do it. Then a new staff worker took over in that city. We invested a lot in them. We brought them over. We worked with them. And to begin with, we started to organise some events. Then over the last 2 years, we've run missions. And this was one of the events that we organised, with over 100 people coming along over a series of 4 nights. They did it. They didn't give up. And 6 years later, the fruit has been that actually that mission was far better than many of the missions I've ever seen in the UK. Even though they're in a difficult context. So the persistence of not giving up, but carrying on. A few weeks ago, I was in Ukraine, doing the mission there, and on the first day, we had 1 guest come to the lunch bar talk, which is a little bit discouraging when you've flyered and you've given out invitations, and you're thinking, oh, this is discouraging. So we prayed hard, we invited more, and we didn't give up. And by the end of the week, again, there was about 100 people packed into that venue, many of them not yet Christians. Brilliant to see how God was at work there, because they didn't give up. And I've just found that a real encouragement to me, and I think we should find that encouragement. When things don't work well, don't give up. Evaluate, pray, and then do it again, but do it better. Learn from mistakes, and don't give up. Be persistent in that. But finally, and if you've been counting, this is the 11th P, patience. We don't always see the fruits of what we do straight away. A year ago, I remember being so moved by that verse in Galatians, do not become weary in doing good, for if you don't give up at the proper time, you'll reap a harvest. And sometimes mission weeks can be tough. It's hard sharing the gospel. You know, as Lindsay Brown, a friend of mine, some of you know him, says, we need a bottomless capacity to handle disappointments. You know, you invite 10 people to come, 9 of them say no. And then out of the 10 that do come, 5 of them aren't interested. And then the 5 that say they're going to come to the follow-up, 4 of them drop out, and so on. That's what it's like. And that's, you know, it might sound encouraging, but there are challenges as well. It's not that universities are just that much easier. It's tough. But the fruit when you don't give up, when you're patient. Share 2 stories. Back in November, I showed you that picture earlier of the weekend away that we did with the Bristol Christian Union. And I spoke at that weekend, and on the last Sunday morning, I preached on John 21. And I remember on the drive home, Elizabeth, my colleague, said to me, she says, wow, I really felt that God was at work this morning. There was a real sense of God's presence in that meeting. And I said, yeah, I felt that too. And Gareth shared the same. But we had no idea what had happened. After all, it was a weekend for Christian students. It wasn't really primarily evangelistic anyway. And then it got to the mission week in February. And it was the Thursday night. And each night I was interviewing a different students about how they'd become a Christian. And this particular night, there was a girl that had been lined up for it. And I said to the Christian Union member, do you know this girl? What's her story? She said, I don't know her at all. I don't know her story. You'll have to find out. So I said to her, well, meet up with me an hour before. We can go through it. And so we sat down and I said, well, when did you become a Christian? And she said, not till November. I said, when in November? Well, on the weekend away. Well, when on the weekend away? Well, on the Sunday morning when you preached on John 21 about loving Jesus being the mark of what a Christian is. And she said, I realized that I had never really fallen in love with Jesus. I'd always been to church, but I never knew what it was to love him. And so I went back to my room and I trusted Christ, and she was going on with Jesus. I had no idea that had happened until 6 months later at the mission week. One other story, which I found even more encouraging, is something that happened back in November. I got an email from someone who I'd met 5 years before. She had come along to an event that Johnny Peters had organised. Some of you know Johnny, part of the church here, when he was a student in London. And she'd come along to this talk in someone's house, as it was. And the next day I met up with her. We'd studied the Bible together. She had shown a lot of interest. She'd made some kind of indication that she wanted to trust Jesus. I wrote to her. I gave her a book. I put her in touch with Christians. I heard nothing from her. She had shared that her boyfriend wasn't a Christian and she was worried what he might think. And 5 years later, in November, I get this email from her saying, I was just moving house and I came across your letter as I was sorting things out. And she said, I realized I'd never told you what had happened. She said, for 1 year, I tried to forget about everything you told me because my boyfriend wasn't interested in Jesus and I didn't want to lose him. But she said, after 1 year, Jesus won and my boyfriend lost. And so I ended the relationship and I started a relationship with Jesus. She said, I'm now married to another guy who is a Christian. We're members of St. Helens Bishopsgate in London. We're involved in the student ministry of our church here. And she said, I just wanted to write and thank you because it was the talk, the book, and the conversation and the letter that I found so helpful in that process of coming to know Christ. 5 years, I hadn't heard anything. We need to be patient, don't we? If you want to hear an even more amazing story, Michael Green, who I often work with on missions, told me recently of a letter that he received, or an email rather, from a chap who had been on a mission week that he had been speaking at. He'd actually missed the talk. He'd been invited by his friend, but he came at the end to apologize. So Michael took the opportunity, even though he hadn't been in the talk, to share a bit of the gospel and give him a book and encourage him to go away and read it. He said, I did go away and read that book, and I did trust Christ, and I'm still a Christian today, but I never told you, and I just wanted to say thank you. You know how long ago that mission was? 53 years ago. So be patient. You never know what might have happened, and we won't know the full story until eternity. Well, there are some of the principles that we've been encouraging Christian unions to take on board, and hopefully they're principles as a church that actually we can learn from as well. But I want to hand over to Julian to give you a little bit of the background in terms of the trust, because you might wonder who is on the trust and how it works, and so over to you.
Thanks, Michael. I think that was exciting stuff. This is the maybe slightly more boring stuff. This is the ET of the MOET logo, so Michael Ott's Evangelism Trust. We thought it'd be good just to explain the purpose of the trust, introduce the trustees, and also talk about how we help to support Michael and the rest of the team, the associates that we have on a regular basis, the staff, and so on. And it's an opportunity just to share that with you. As we've said earlier, the key element to all that what we're doing is prayer. And I know that a number of people here support the trust regularly in prayer, support Michael and the rest of the team. That's the key element. And we'll also talk about finance as well. Obviously, Michael can't live on thin air. He has a flat to pay for and so on. And also the rest of the team as well. We have staff that we need to pay. So we're just going to introduce a few of the people. So on the left-hand side, you all know Gaynor. She works as the administrator. So she organises everything really, organises Michael's diary.
Tries to.
Flights, yeah. Try to organise Michael, which is a challenge. Doing all the different things in the office here, paying the salaries, doing the bookkeeping and so on. So Gaynor's a sort of unsung hero, I guess, of MOET over the last 7 years, I guess. Then on the right-hand side, we've got Gareth. Again, you'll have come across him here at Lansdowne. He's the director of training, so he's very much involved in supporting Michael and the team in training. He puts together literature, updates the website, and lots of other things. He's been on his own independently to missions, leading missions as well. So he's got great experience in the student world. Then I thought we'd just move on to the trustees, just so you know who those people are. Before I go through these 6 people on the screen, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. We've heard today about OMF and the significant work that OMF has done over the last 150 years. Well, the previous General Secretary of OMF was David Pickard, prior to the guy we saw that started in 2006, earlier in the service. And David Pickard, when he retired from OMF, came over to the UK, and he was really fundamental to the trust and the setting up of the trust, working with Michael to set the trust up with the other trustees. And David has done 6 years with the trust, and he actually stepped down as chair of the trustees at Christmas. So it's a great, it's a good day really that we can mention David's work and the work that he did to really get the trust moving forward. And also Judith Berry, she was part of the original trust, the trustees, and Judith did great work keeping everyone together on a secretarial basis, bringing all the minutes up to date, making sure we had the right trustees in the right place and so on. So great thanks to Judith as well for the support that she's given the trust over a number of years. So just looking at the trustees on the board, on the top right, you probably recognise that face. That's Mike Reynolds. Mike is an elder here at Lansdowne. He again was one of the original trustees. He takes responsibility for various elements in the trust, supervision of mentoring of associates, links with other organisations, particularly with Lansdowne. In the middle, at the top, is Lizzie Ross. Lizzie just joined the trust in about, I think, January last year. Lizzie she works in the Human Resources Department at the British Museum. She lives in Surrey, but her skills and experience are very useful to the trust, where we have to deal with contracts and various other things that we have for staff. Top left, don't know who that is. She's painting a wall at the end of on a lighthouse somewhere in Dorset. That's my wife Mary. Mary again is a trustee. Mary does a lot of fundraising work and also mentoring and supervision of associates. Bottom left is Claire Saunders. Claire works in education. Claire is a member at St Paul's Throop, and Claire's main emphasis is training and supporting the training work that we do as a trust, not only for the associates that come to see us on an annual basis, but also short-term training for people like Marina, who came in for a month, and so on. Then there's bottom right is Nay Dawson. Nay was, again, one of the original trustees. She's a UCF staff worker. She's currently on maternity leave, both from MOET and from UCCF, but has been a great support to the trust all through those years. And then there's me in the middle at the bottom. I think that was when we that photo was when the associates, so Elisa and Elizabeth, last year, the first thing we did was take them out rowing on the river. So we were just having a picnic there. So I'm taking responsibility for chairing the trust at the moment, and finance, as you probably guessed, is my bag as well. So I look after the overall financing of the trust. So that's just a quick whiz around the trustees, just so you know who we are. And the fact that we, I guess one of the features of the trust is that we're a group of people that are working constantly with Michael and the team to support them. We're not just meeting every 3 months. The key is that we're a team, we're the MOET family, I guess, as we call ourselves. And it's really key that we can support Michael and the rest of the staff in doing that. And the other key element of the trust is the fact that the trust couldn't exist without the many of you in this room who support the trust financially. You support the trust in prayer, and that's again the key. The purpose of the trust is to evangelize students across Europe, and you've seen the excitement of the changes that we've seen across Europe, the pioneering work that the trust is doing in association with other organisations, FOIA, IFES, all those countries around Europe. And it's really exciting to be a part of that. And it's great that all the people that support the trust can be a part of that as well. So we really covet your support, we covet your prayers, we covet your finances as well. If you're able to support us financially, that's great. We need to pay Michael, we need to pay Gareth, we need to pay Gaynor, and we also have the associates coming in. Often they support themselves. If they're coming from relatively wealthy countries, then they can support their own work. But the other thing that we are keen to do is to support people who are coming from countries that aren't quite so wealthy. So one of the things that we do with Trust Money is to support people coming on short-term mission to work with the trust. So again, that's a great opportunity for everybody to be involved in that work. So finally, the little request, I guess, if anyone here is keen to get involved from what they've heard today, then we'd be really pleased if you could do that, either in prayer or financially. There are various forms and notes down here that if you're able to do that, that'd be great. Also, we've got a couple of Michael's only 2 books here. If you wanted to buy one of those, I'm not sure, is it £4?
£5.
£5.
Well, let's say £4 for today.
All right,
yeah.
£4, special offer today. The book's over here. One of the reasons you might think Michael's looking a bit brown, well, one of the reasons for that is that he's been sitting, mainly at our beach hut, I think, writing his 3rd book. So I think we're 2 chapters away from completion of Michael's 3rd book. So hopefully that'll be released in the autumn.
New Year.
January. So get that for your New Year presents. So I think that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Julian. So do grab stuff at the end, and if you want to sign up to get a prayer letter, there'll be a new one coming out in a couple of weeks, but there's a few of the old ones there, so you can see what kind of thing you'll be getting, and so on. Grab one at the end. But there's one other way that I wanted to encourage you that you could be involved, and that is not just by praying, not just by giving, not just by that kind of support, but actually coming. You might think, well, I'm not a student, I couldn't be involved in student missions. Well, Mary Nathy is not a student either, so I'm just going to invite her to come up, because this year Mary came on a mission week. You were in Swansea with us, weren't you?
Yes.
There you are, at the back of the group, just to give proof.
That's my Swansea family.
There you go. And another one, just to show we didn't Photoshop you in. With some of the team. So, Mary, you came to the Swansea Mission Week. You hadn't been on a mission week before. So, what were some of your kind of feelings going to it before you got there?
Well, I think Michael's already explained that I'm not a student, and I'm, well, I guess probably more like 30 years older than most of the team. So it was slightly daunting. I wanted to go because I sort of landed myself this role as trustee, and I think God just has this habit of placing us in situations for reasons, and I had sort of wrestled with that a bit, so I thought it was about time I went and had a look and see what they actually do. But I was, a bit apprehensive, I suppose, because I thought, what will a load of students want an old fogey like me doing on their mission team? So it was fear of the unexpected, I suppose. I mean, I tend to go into most situations quite happily for myself, but I was slightly anxious for them, thinking, what would they make of me?
And did you end up sleeping on a floor in a hallway?
Oh, I was terrified I might, but actually that was one of the ways that God surprised me, really, because it wasn't just about taking part in this student mission week, because I thought I'd probably be on some floor in some hall of residence up the top of a tower block or something. But the first night I got there, I was taken to my accommodation, and I was placed with a Nepalese family who had just arrived in the country, young mum with 2 very young children, and her husband who was doing a PhD at the uni. And it was immediately obvious that that was part of the reason why I was there that week. So, it was great. I had prayed before that I'd be used, and that was, I think, one of the reasons why I was there.
One of the great things about having a team to come and help, that they're able to live with the students in the Christian Union, support them, encourage them in that way. And how did you find the week? What was your highlights?
Oh, it was wonderful. I loved it. I had a really good week. I didn't think about home once. I just went into this student world. It was wonderful. I just escaped into this team. There were loads of lovely, lovely students, and I was quite pleased because they wanted to learn from me, which I was surprised about. And it was just little things like helping them. They were terrified. What do I say to that group of Muslim men who are sitting outside a cafe? How do I get them to come? Just being able to give little bits of snippets of wisdom, I suppose. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was brilliant. There were too many highlights. There was a highlight every day. I can't single one out in 5 minutes.
Yeah. And if anyone else was kind of thinking about it, but maybe a bit fearful, what would your encouragement be?
Feel the fear and do it anyway, I think, because there was a certain amount of fear attached. But I don't know, I've learned that God can use that fear for good purposes, I think, and if we allow him, he will do amazing things. There's lots in the Bible about calling on him and asking and seeking, just ways in which he can use us, I guess, in terms of people. And you said about personal one-to-one relationships and things. And for me, it isn't standing up the front and speaking to hordes of people or whatever, but yeah, it was the one-to-one conversations I had were amazing. It was nice escaping to the beach occasionally with the other team members and encouraging some of them.
Mary did deliberately pick the university that was closest to the beach in the entire United Kingdom.
No, that's not true, actually.
God picked it for you.
That.
Yeah. She was going to be in Nottingham, which is about the furthest from the beach in the United Kingdom. Brilliant. But you'd recommend it?
I would thoroughly recommend it, yeah, and I would say don't be sitting there thinking that it's not for you because you're not a student, because I would have said that, but yeah, go.
Great. If you're interested, get in touch with us. We can tell you the dates of the missions, both in the UK and also the ones across Europe, and if you're interested in applying to be a part of that, it'd be great. Whatever age you are, whether you feel you're students savvy or not, do get in touch. It'd be great to be able to have others come from Lansdowne and be a part of what's been going on. I'm sure that you'll find it really encouraging as well. We've got about